Hey everyone, welcome to the latest installment of MSP Business School. I'm Brian Doyle, and with me today are, of course, my co-hosts, Rob Rogers and Tim McNeil. What's going on, gents? I feel like it's been so long since I've seen you.
Yeah, it's been all of
A
what,
week.
Yeah.
5 days?
Yeah, we just spent a lot of
Maybe
time
six.
together
Six
over at
days.
ChannelCon.
No,
As
no,
always,
no.
great to get out there and see each other in person. But more importantly, it was great to see the MSP community coming out in a rather large number.
Yeah, it was a great show.
Definitely seeing the post-COVID effects of people, feeling comfortable, feeling confident again about getting out and attending some of these shows. And it was great to see some people I hadn't seen since pre-COVID. I don't know what your guys' experiences were.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. The one thing on a completely unrelated note to ChannelCon, one of the weirdest things I've ever seen in my life is the last day of the show outside of the hotel. They had a dump truck full of rubber ducks that they dumped into the river.
No kidding.
It was the weirdest thing. There were thousands of people lining the river. It was the weirdest thing.
Yeah, Ducky Derby is what it was called, and it was a race. Right. So it was a volunteer charity event, and you put your number on a duck, put the duck in the dump truck, and then it dumped everything off the bridge, and then the ducks raced with the current, and whoever won whatever they were. But it was basically just a charity thing. It was pretty cool.
For the listeners, just in case you weren't at ChannelCon and you don't know where we're talking about, it was the Chicago River. We were down in Chicago, and I saw a lot of interesting things going on in the river. I was sitting out there the day before, and there was a guy he was electronically sending out bubbles to the passing boats. So they went through bubbles going out there. So a lot of interesting things happened in Chicago.
It was Chicago. It was definitely Chicago.
But you know what, as I always like to say when we get to this point, nobody cares what we're up to anyway. They're here for our guests. So I want to welcome our special guest today, Garret Peaslee, to our show. Garret is the former CEO of CCANT, recently when we talk about COVID times, recently went through a mergers and acquisitions event, and he is now a consultant serving the MSP space. So Garret, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Welcome, sir.
Yeah, good to have you on.
Good to see you.
So, Garret, we love to kick these things off by learning a little bit about you, yourself, and kind of your journey first into the MSP world, and then, what kind of brought you to making the decision to exit, at least from an MSP perspective, that side of the table.
Okay. Well, I had a long journey. I was in the business around my company for 33 years. Started back in 1986, before there was such a thing as the internet or the cell phone or even networks back then. And there was no such thing as a managed service provider. So that was still well out in the distance. And I started my business focused around desktop publishing. Which today is not a big deal because every application basically has desktop publishing built into it. But back then it was a specialty capability, and we were doing it on an early Macintosh and an Apple laser writer as the output device with PostScript in it, which was radically new. And the first piece of software that did page layout, which was PageMaker. And that's what we focused our business around, were those three items, and made a business of that and grew our company over the course. We started in 1986, and by 1990 we had 45 people in our company and had grown.
Wow, how many, Garret? I'm sorry, how many was that?
We had 45 people. We had 3 offices: Grand Rapids, Michigan, Kalamazoo, Michigan, and down in Mishawaka, Indiana. So we had 3 offices, and we were going, we were doing quite well. And then the market changed on us. And, back in those days, everything was expensive. So, a Macintosh with a 10 meg hard drive was $4,500. And an Apple LaserWriter printer was $7,500. And a piece of software was $1,000. And you sold it all together as a package and made 50% margins. Who does that today, right?
Good old days.
Could you imagine today?
Yeah, good old days. And So we would include delivery and installation and some training and ongoing support, all in the price of a turnkey system. And then the early 90s rolled around and the first big box store showed up, and mail order catalogs started carrying all of the equipment and the software. And so our margins over the course of 6 to 8 months went from 50% down to about 15%. Wow. Which when you have that kind of margin squeeze and you've been used to doing something different, it requires a major re-engineering of your organization to survive. And so we had to retrain our staff that we now couldn't give everything away as a turnkey system. It was also a la carte. And we had to train our customers that was the case, which was a difficult undertaking. And we had to train ourselves, frankly, because, that kind of a radical change is tough to deal with. Anyway, and then over the course of the years, desktop publishing diminished in significance, and we got into networking and got away from the Macintosh computer and into PCs. And the Ethernet network had come along, and the internet had come along, and the cell phones had come along, and so everything evolved over time. The technology got better and better. We started seeing applications that were being delivered over the internet. Of course, the delivery of all of our services changed. Changed from reactive services to selling blocks of hours, to selling days a month, to turning into managed service orientation. So, we went through all of those different changes. I've told people before that we re-engineered our company probably 4 or 5 times over the course of 30 years. Yeah. And if you don't, in the tech industry, we always said, if you don't evolve, you die, just like the dinosaurs. So we were constantly evolving. And we got to, we got it in our heads around 2012 that we ought to build our own data center. And that was really one of the momentous decisions we made. My partners and I were all in our late 50s or early 60s about that time. And we decided we'd build a data center and spend $4 or $5 million in the course of doing that and make that huge investment. At that point, we were delivering data center services out of a closet, effectively, that was in our building. And every time a thunderstorm rolled through or there was even a hint of a tornado, I was just scared to death.
Glad somebody else understands what that feels like, right? So you hit upon a couple of things right there, right? First, the spend part of it is anybody that thinks that you're just going to go build a data center and it's going to cost you a few bucks. That is definitely not the case. But I used to be the same way. If I knew a hurricane was coming or there was going to be some sort of storm, I was up half the night just watching the continuous ping to make sure we were up. Right. Little crazy things like that. Because I'm like, the minute anything goes down, even if it's for a second, it's going to come back to me. Right. And I don't know if you ever, unfortunately, we experienced one time where we had a bit of a failure. We had an automatic transfer switch that didn't kick over during a storm. And that is not a fun time because the electric company basically said, yeah, do not touch that. You may die. Yeah. We had to wait until 8 o'clock the next morning when somebody could actually roll out and help us with it, which meant 7.5 hours of talking to people on the phone, telling us you're down and knowing it. So good times.
Yep. You probably had a SWAT team set up to make all the phone calls.
And then open conference lines, all that good stuff. And that's also probably why you and I have white hair, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, what hair I have left.
Yeah, exactly, right. But you talked about some of the adaptation and change that happens. And I loved when you kind of went back to that 95 period. It seemed like there was so much rapid change between 95 and 2000 where, really end users actually got PCs. Internet was coming into play. The transition from dial-up to, fast internet, although fast internet being a T1 at that point in time was coming into play, but yet the hardware margins were still there at that point in time. It was a really interesting time, and a time where a lot of people who made their real money in the MSP world started
Yeah.
that. You know, they bankrolled the next generation of themselves off of the first generation.
Right. Well, and we were still learning the value of monthly recurring revenue, right? Back at that point, we had figured out enough that, you know, you either buy 3 or 4 days a week of support and you use it or lose it, you don't get to bank it. So we had figured that much out. But, you know, the tools had really not come along until in the 2000s that allowed MSPs to really exist the way they do today, because the value of the MSP is the fact that you deploy all the tools that an individual company can't deploy in, you know, themselves. And by using those tools, we make ourselves more efficient, and which allows us to turn around and deliver those services at a rate that is, you know, that an end user can afford to purchase. So, you know, that was what has evolved over time. In my, you know, my perspective is that it's the, you know, the fact that the internet's become so deployed everywhere, it's just so ubiquitous, and you know, and the tools that we derive to deliver our services. And that's, you know, and the data center for us, you know, we were doing roughly 150,000 a month in data center services before we built the data center. And that, you know, and I couldn't afford to have that go down, like you pointed out, that you know, you got so many customers, and the customers are not only data center customers, but they're customers for your MSP services,
Exactly,
for all kind, you know. And so if you screw up one piece of your business by having your data center go down, then you probably lose the customer in 4 or 5 other touch points that you might have with them. So it was crucial that it be kept up. And so we jumped in and built this data center, and grew our service levels in the data center to over 700,000 a month in data centers.
kudos, that's great.
So that, and frankly, that was the major turning point in our business decisions, because when we got to the point in around 2018 that we were going to, you know, sell or you know, transition out of our company, it was the monthly recurring revenues and the data center services at that point that we learned were of the highest value. The multipliers that apply to those are so much more than any kind of project services we had to offer. So, you know, in some way we lucked into what we did. But you know, it was all in staying current and transitioning in the market space, so that we were delivering services that were competitive with everybody else.
Perfect.
And so, yeah, we went through a process. We hired actually an M&A person who brokered our business, and you know, we had an idea of what our business was worth, and he came in and looked at it and said, well, if I market this for you, I can get at least twice that. And so he helped us, you know, prepare the business for sale over the course of 6 months to a year. Fortunately, we'd done many of the things. We'd grown to the point, you know, we were doing 18 to 20 million in sales. I had a complete structure put in place in terms of management structure and organization structure, which lined up with, you know, selling a business of that size. And so it, you know, he was able to embellish what we were doing and put it in a format that could be marketed. And, you know, ultimately we had 3 offers to purchase the business. We had our pick of 3 suitors, and we picked a company that fit very nicely with our culture, which is important. And we had 35 people from the company go along with the data center piece of our business. And, you know, that was 3 years ago. And I think probably 75 or 80% of those people are still with that company. So it worked, nice. You know, it worked real well. We were very concerned about our staff. You know, it wasn't a sell and run kind of a deal. You know, we always took good care of our staff. And we wanted them to continue to have good jobs fortunately, we made a good choice there so that our staff was happy with the decisions that we made, and we all, we walked away with a retirement nest egg, which was a great thing.
So was that the first time that you were ever approached, Garret? Or, like I said, like it just seems like, over a 33 year span, I'm sure you were approached before. Did you test out other offers to kind of learn how to, go into the M&A space, or was this the first time?
No, we'd had one other activity a couple years before. We were actually considering becoming an ESOP. We were instead of actually selling the company, we were thinking of turning it into an ESOP and extracting money out of it, for the ownership through that process. In the course of doing that, we ran into a company in the Midwest that was an ESOP as well in the technology field. And, we entertained an offer from them to join or merge our company with them. And that's where we got the concept of our initial value, because they were willing to pay about 50% of what we ultimately sold the company for. But it wasn't until we actually got this broker to work with us who, had done many deals and knew how to structure it and how to market it, that it really, that it really got its full value.
Well, and I think so on top of you growing this really large MSP and selling it for a great multiple and going not an untraditional route as far as how to exit. I think, to me, one of the more unique things about your story is the fact that you can't leave out the fact that you're the sales manager too. It's pretty rare that we find MSP owners that grow an MSP or a company to that size where the owner is also the sales manager and in doing it at a very effective rate. Usually there's just not enough hours in the day. And if you just talk through that a little bit, it really breaks a mold. It really does.
Well, sometimes, necessity is, a result of desperation, right? So you're trying to minimize your expense structure, right? And so so you do things that you really shouldn't do. One of the best things that we ever did was we became part of a peer group back in 2002, and it was one of the early peer groups. I ran the business for the first 15 years by the seat of my pants, basically. I had 3 partners ultimately ended up with 3 partners, but I was the lead person. But anyway, and they were all active partners. So, they formed the board of directors effectively. We had our own board of directors on the partners. But we went through this peer group, and it was about 2014 or 2015. I went to a peer group meeting, and I was doing my corporate presentation. So one of the guys in the crowd there in the group raised his hand and said, "Well, just how many people do you manage anyway?" And I started listing off, I had supervisors that reported to me, and I had salespeople that reported to me, and I had, I don't know, whoever else. I had about 18 or 20 people. And he told me I was insane for having that many people reporting to me. And it was about a year or 2 later that I figured out that, the sales management piece I really needed to offload, because I had 8 or 9 salespeople at that point, as well as other people, related to the sales process. And so I did extract myself in the last couple of years from being the sales manager. But, the thing is that if you're the sales manager and you're running the company, sales are the lifeblood of the company. And I always wanted to know what was in the pipeline and what was coming along and what the issues were relative to closing deals. And I was very good. I could pretty much off the top of my head list off people's pipelines for them, because that's the lifeblood. So you live and breathe every day with sales.
Yeah.
And so it's very important. So that's why I wanted to keep my fingers in the sales management area to make sure I understand.
Okay.
So,
Fair.
Garrett, one of the things, Rob started touching upon it, but one of the things I wanted to get a little deeper in is, as our listeners really like a lot of the M&A stories as they're trying to understand what to expect and what to anticipate. Maybe you could talk a little bit about what was your selection process in finding a consultant, even if it was somebody referred to you, what were you looking for out of that individual? And then maybe a little bit about, as they kind of immersed themselves in your business and started getting to know you, what were some of the findings that you had to course correct in order to really be able to maximize your exit?
Well, the person that we ultimately worked with was referred to us, and so our selection process was not very wide. We got introduced to this guy, and we liked him initially, and he came with a good set of references that we checked out. He'd been in the business for 15 or 20 years, and had a good track record. So it's not like we cast a net out there and interviewed 5 or 10 different, firms or individuals. We kind of went with the first person we came along with, which was, it could have been a mistake, but it turned out to work out well for us. The things that he pointed out to us was that we had too many expenses on our books. We had too many people. We had areas of the business that were not producing the revenue that they should, costing us too much. We were not. We were just too fat in terms of how we were running the business. And if I've read the book The Pumpkin Plan since, and I've gotten familiar with traction. And I would have done things much differently over the course of the years if I'd read some of those books earlier on. But he pointed out that we had areas in the business that were not really germane to the long-term maintenance and growth of the company, and so we actually had to do some culling of the business over the last 6 to 12 months in order to get our costs down, so that our EBIT number went up, and so therefore the multiplier applied to that. So that was, in large part, something that he brought to the table that woke us up and made us take a close look at that and make some decisions, to make some changes that we hated to make. It's no fun to, it's always fun to hire people, and it's never fun to terminate them.
Yep. So he did 2 parts, Garrett. You're saying that he came in and operationally made you a stronger company, a more lean company, but then did he also do the marketing side to market you to companies to sell as well? Did he handle that piece?
Oh yeah, that's more what he did. I mean, in the course of having discussions with us, he said, you got to get your expense structure down in order to demonstrate that, what your profitability level is. And so, yeah, that was one side of it. The other, but he did do the marketing. He had a 60-page marketing document that had financials in it and had all kinds of stuff related to the company. And he knew where to put those things out in the general space to have companies be interested in investigating our company and coming in. And we ended up with 6 or 8 interviews with different interested prospective buyers, and
that's great.
that got reduced down to 3 that ultimately provided bids. And the 2 best bids were within, $20,000 of one another. So, they were close. So he did and then he helped all the way through, the process of getting a purchase agreement put in place, which took us 6 months to do the purchase agreement, which all the disclosures, that's a painful process, creating all the disclosures and going through all of that work. And we ended up hiring a fairly high-end attorney to represent us through that purchase agreement process, which is an expensive activity. And so, I did most of that work in terms of creating those disclosures, and then our broker would, he would go take those disclosures and actually reformat them into a standard format that is typical for, the M&A market space. So that was, he did a lot of work along those lines to help make this deal come together.
Garret, I know that you've got a hard stop for our conversation today, so we want to definitely make sure that we respect your time. But
yeah, I appreciate that.
Is there any final parting words of wisdom you want to share with our audience?
Well, over the course of this, the monthly recurring revenue is just what is the value in terms of a resale of your company. But I guess the other part of it that is to run your company leanly, and something that I did not do as well as I should have. And we were always trying to make decisions about what businesses to stay in and which ones to get out of, and we should have gotten out of more earlier. And we were just it's really tough to walk away from some things.
Yeah.
So running your business leanly would be something that I would tell everybody to pay attention to.
Okay. Well, Garret, I really appreciate you being here today. And for the audience, I guess there's two things: whether you're a $20 million MSP or a $1.5 million MSP, peer groups are the end all be all.
Yeah.
They always help. Every single time we are on with a guest, peer groups changed everything for them. Garret, we appreciate you being here today. For anybody that's looking to get a hold of Garret, we will be including his LinkedIn profile with the podcast. And also this episode will be up on MSP Business School or anywhere that you get your podcast, to include YouTube. So please like and subscribe. Fellas, I really appreciate it today. Brian, Tim, it was great to see you guys again. Garret, we appreciate it. And have a great day, everybody.
Take care. Thanks
for coming on, Garret.
All right. Thank you.
All right.